All right, welcome back to another episode of the Whole Nine Yards. This is gonna be our mock or NBA mock draft video, but me and Drew just couldn't get the timing right for when we could record together. So it's gonna be me solo, then him solo, and we're just gonna put it together. But so I don't know if you're gonna see mine first or his first, but that's how it's gonna be. So yeah, so this is gonna be my first mock draft. The draft is in 3 days. It's Thursday, July 29th. Today's Monday, July 26th. So this is the first one, and then we're planning on doing one together before that, whether it's Thursday, like in the morning, or like Wednesday, whenever we'll figure it out. But that one will be together, but this one we just couldn't get together. But all right, so I'm going to start. I'm kind of going to get straight into it. I'm going to do the first 15 picks. I'm not going to do trades in mine. We might do trades. I think we'll probably do trades when me and Drew do ours together. It doesn't mean you have to do it, but at least that option's available. But for this one, I'm not going to do any trades. So I'm going to start with the first pick. It's the Detroit Pistons, and I feel like this is a pretty easy pick. I don't think that this is a pick that I think there's definitely some other guys you could look at, but I think when you do all your research and kind of go through the options, I think it's really only one guy, and I think it's Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State. He's been the number one overall pick basically the entire college season. So not saying that means anything, but he has been kind of that number one guy the entire year by experts and mock draft guys. So it's definitely not surprising that he'd go number one. I think it's the right choice. And for a team like the Pistons, where they haven't been relevant the last 12 to 15 years, they need a guy like this who is going to be. I think he's probably one of the safer picks you could take out of these top guys. He's 6'8". Already. He's only 19 years old, so he definitely has at least a chance to maybe grow another inch or two. He's going to be your point guard. So, I mean, you could have, obviously it seems like the point guards nowadays are just taller guys. If you think of like, even though Ben Simmons, he's a point guard, but he definitely can play bigger. I wouldn't expect Cade to play like as big as Ben Simmons, but he's a big point guard. LaMelo Ball is like 6'8", 6'9". He's a point guard. So the new point guards nowadays are seeming to be taller. Which I think is a good thing because it helps with defense. Which Cade he's definitely been better at defense than probably people would think. He is kind of one of the top defenders. When looking at what he brings to you offensively and then defensively, he's very good two-way player. So that helps him out a lot. Also, again, that size is huge, and his ability to make shots, I think, is also just another aspect of his game that he already has at such a young age. So that's only going to get better, you would assume. But it's already pretty good for where he's at. Again, it's not even in the NBA yet. So I think that the combination of his ability to make outside shots, be able to get teammates involved. He's not the greatest passer, but he's definitely willing to pass. And I think that, over the first year or two, he's going to just get more experience and he's going to become a better, decision maker on the court. He's going to be able to see, plays develop. He's going to be able to see what the defense is doing. So that may take a year or two, but I think that's expected. But just that ability to make his shots outside. He's going to have the ball probably almost all the time in Detroit. He's going to be playing with Killian Hayes, so we'll see how much, who has the ball more often. I would assume Cade would have the ball, but I guess we'll see. And then, again, his defensive versatility, I think, is huge for them also. Again, it's going to be a bad year for the Pistons. I mean, no one's expecting them to win a lot of games. They'll probably be back near the number one spot next year, unless Cade is just absolutely ridiculous. And then maybe they can, get like up to like 25, 30 wins, and maybe they're not down towards the top of the lottery, but maybe they're kind of towards that, 5, 6, 7, 8, somewhere around there. But again, they'll be in the lottery, probably top 10 for sure, top 5 most likely. So I'm not really going to judge the team success based off him, but this is definitely the safest pick. And for Detroit, you need a superstar there. You're not going to really attract free agents. So in order to draft a guy like this and the ability for him to turn into a superstar is just absolutely huge for him. So moving on to number 2, this is kind of, I think people say the draft starts at 4. I think it kind of starts, or actually at 5. I think it kind of starts here because I think you have 2 really good options for the Rockets to take at number 2, and that's between Jalen Green and then Evan Mobley. I think Mobley would probably be the better pick. I think he just, like, his upside, I think, is just way higher than Jalen Green. I mean, his ability to be as good as he is defensively already. Again, he's 7 foot. He's gonna get more weight on him. He's only 215 right now. He's 19 years old. That's the age I am right now. So he's gonna have more weight on him as the years go by. And I've seen a lot of comps to him possibly turning into like maybe not the same player, but his ability to fill out his size and then have the ability to possibly be that type of player, as in Anthony Davis or Giannis. And we just saw what they did the last two finals, where you need a guy like that, a 7 foot guy who's really good defensively, who can switch on the guards on the outside, can create his own shot, and also attack when he has to. He's also a really good passer, but I think that would probably be the right pick at 2, but I think the Rockets want to go with Jalen Green, that's who I'm going to take in this mock draft. I'm going to take Jalen Green because I think that's the pick that they're going to go with. Again, for me, I think the better guy would be Mobley, but he does seem like a little bit more of a development guy. He probably would take him a year or two to get more comfortable with the NBA games, where Jalen Green, I think his game translates really well to the NBA. He was in the G League, so he's not going against college guys last season like everyone else. He was going against, older NBA guys or just guys who, obviously aren't in college but aren't good enough to make the NBA. So it's still a level up. And he was really good. He started off pretty slow, but then he got a lot better towards the end of the year. And almost all of his teammates have said that this guy is the real deal, which I think does matter because, again, he was playing with NBA guys. And I just think that for the Rockets, you only have your first round pick the next 2 years. And then I think, it basically goes away. You really don't have any first round picks because of that trade with the Thunder. So you basically have 2 more years of getting the right guy in the top of the draft. And I think Jalen Green for them, it has that superstar capability right away, which is something that they want. Obviously, they wanted that first overall pick to get Cade. I mean, that's kind of why they just tanked the entire season. So for them not to get that obviously hurt, but you still get number 2. I think Jalen Green can right away be, kind of like an Anthony Edwards almost, and where he's going to take a lot of shots. He's on a bad team. He doesn't have a cat with him. The next best player, I guess, is Christian Wood, I guess. Maybe John Wall if he's healthy, but probably Christian Wood. So you don't really have like that other superstar capability guy. You kind of have, a couple of guys who are decent. So I think he's going to take a lot of shots. I think he's going to have the ball. He's not much of a ball handler, but I think he'll have the ball a lot. So like Edwards, I think he may struggle towards the beginning, just finding his game and getting used to the NBA game. But towards the end of the season, I think he's really going to turn it on. He's probably going to get you 20 points per game, like right away. I think that's just the type of player that he is. And for the rest of his career, he's going to be a 20 plus point per game scorer. And you only hope that the defensive ability will somewhat come up. He's never going to be a great defender, but you just hope that the effort's there. That's kind of all you really hope for with a guy like this. But if he's going to give you 20 plus points per game his rookie season, and then you would hope that gets up to like 25 and even more possibly, you obviously would take that. There's no question about that. So I think that's the pick that the Rockets will go with. But in my eyes, I think Mobley is the better player, for their careers. But I think Green probably has that superstar capability right away, and I think that's what the Rockets are looking for. But moving on to number 3. So the Cavs have this pick, and this is where I'd want to do trades because I think this is a perfect trade opportunity for the Cavs. I think that Mobley, I think they'd love Mobley to have him, and I think you'd rather have Mobley than Green if you're the Cavs because you have the Sexton and Garland situation where you already have 2 guards who are basically point guards, but not point guards, but you have to play one of them at point guard and the other has to play 2 guard because of their size. So, and then Sexton, do you trade him? What are you getting back in that trade? Do you possibly extend him or something? What are you doing with that whole situation? So they're in a really, I think, bad situation with those guys. So I think if it is Mobley at that number 3 spot, I think they're happy because if they don't trade that pick, I think they're happy with taking Mobley. They already have Jared Allen. We'll see if they, extend him. I would be I think he's a restricted free agent, so we'll see what other teams do. But I'd be surprised if they didn't match that because you did trade for him, and he is a really good young player as a center. But again, him and Mobley, we'll have to see how that works out. But I think you'd rather have Mobley than Green if you're the Cavs, if you don't trade. But I guess, again, like I said, we're not doing trades in this mock draft, so they would obviously take Evan Mobley. There's no other player for them to take. And like I was saying earlier, his capability defensively, offensively, he's a guy you can kind of give the ball to in the post or even the elbow, and he can make a play, whether it's driving to the basket, posting up, and then kicking out to the outside to a shooter, which they didn't really have many shooters at Cleveland. But again, that's just the team construction. That's nothing that's going to go against Mobley. So as long as they use him the right way there, which you'd hope that they would, I think it would really work out for them. If they were to take Mobley, keep him, have him be their kind of like next their star player. I think that if they know how to use him, I think it'd really work out because again, him on defense, he's going to be one of the top defenders already. Maybe not through that in the entire league, but over the next 2 to 3 years, he's going to be on that first team or second team all defense. I just don't think there's any doubt about that. So already having that, we're already having one side of the ball locked down like that is just huge, especially for a 19-year-old rookie who you never really know. I mean, we always say this stuff in the draft, like you think he's going to be the next, biggest superstar, but you really don't know. But he's so locked in defensively. I think that's just huge for him already going into the NBA. Something that he has that a lot of other prospects just don't have. They don't have one side locked down like that. So he's obviously the pick at number 3. We'll see if they trade out of that when it comes to draft night. There's a couple teams, the Magic or the Thunder that could possibly trade up into that spot. So we'll see what happens. But again, no trades for this mock draft. So I think they take Mobley at 3. But moving on to number 4, I think this is probably the pick that everyone has going to the Raptors. I think it's probably like 100% people are saying this pick is to the Raptors because he's kind of the guy who's left off that top 3, and it's Jalen Suggs. He's not going to go top 3. There's no way that those first 3 guys are just another level above Suggs. That's something against him. It's just how good those guys are. But I think Suggs he's atop that second level of these prospects. And if you're the Raptors, I think you're definitely happy with this. I mean, Suggs. He's shown in college and even high school, but definitely college last year, that he can be like a leader on the court. He's super competitive, which is huge, I think, especially going to a Raptor organization that kind of has that mentality of we're always going to be super competitive. You play the game. You can learn from Lowry and Siakam about how they play basketball. It seems like when you go into that Raptors organization, you just become a better player in your overall game. So I think that's going to be huge for them. Now, they're a team that's definitely falling off. I mean, that's why they're 4th in the draft this year. But being able to play, you assume Lowry is possibly still there, at least for half the season, maybe till the deadline they trade him or something. But I think that being in this organization is going to be huge for him. I think we'll have room to grow. Again, they're not a team they may look for playoffs this year, but I think they kind of be wrong in doing that. I think they should probably look to sell a little bit when it comes to the deadline, but I think he's going to be a good player for them. I think he's going to be very solid. I don't know if he's ever going to be a superstar, but I think he'll be a very solid player for them. The defense is going to come along. Like I said, he's super competitive, so he's always going to be working on that. And the offense, it's definitely there. It probably has to get a little bit better for him to possibly get up to that, somewhat to that superstar status. But I think he could be a really solid player for them and someone that can just be, after maybe that first or second year, maybe even in that first year, he could be one of their top options on offense. Obviously with Siakam, assuming they keep him, Fred VanVleet's also there. So I think they have a good mix of players to go along with Suggs. So yeah, I mean, Suggs is definitely the pick at number 4 though. Now going on to number 5, this is probably where if you were to go back 2-3 months ago, it would be Jonathan Kuminga. There was these 5 guys who were the first 5 picks no matter what, but that's definitely changed. I think in most people's eyes, definitely in my eyes. And number 5, it's the Magic's pick. So I think that they will not even think. I think I know that they will go with Scotty Barnes to number 5 from Florida State. It just seemed like he's been rising through draft boards the last couple weeks, probably month or 2, I would say, honestly. He was always a guy, who I think if you look at the 2020 high school rankings, he was in that. I think he was rather number 5 or he was number 4, I think he was. So he kind of did fit the spot that he was supposed to go in. And actually, if you look at those rankings, like they were pretty accurate. I mean, I think Cade was number 2, Jalen was number 1, Evan Mobley was number 3, Suggs was 4. Like they were pretty accurate with that rankings going to high school, which isn't always the case if you were to look back at it. But that was just something I noticed when doing the research for it. But Barnes, yeah, he's been rising draft boards. It seems like the Magic will go with him at 5. He seems like more of a lockdown guy, or more of like a solidified guy than Kuminga is right now. There's a lot of questions with Kuminga, but Barnes, it just seemed like he's not the greatest shooter, which is something that obviously you need in the NBA today. But if you can do other stuff really well, which he can do, he can play defense at a somewhat elite level. He can handle the ball really well. He could pass. He can somewhat create his own shot, but not to the point where, not like the other guys in this draft, but he could somewhat do it. But I think he's just going to be an overall floor spacer, a guy who can handle the ball, bring the ball up at his size. I mean, 6'7", 6'8" already. That may be another inch or two added to him. Again, the defense is already there. So it seems like a guy who, is like a championship type, championship team guy. Like if you had a championship team, you want Scottie Barnes on that team because he just fits the team. He's not going to want the ball all the time to take shots. If he does want the ball, it's to distribute to others, to set screens, to space the floor. So that's what he wants to do, and that's huge in this NBA because if you have the right team around that, he doesn't need to be your number one or number two guy. You could have other guys who do that, and he could just be the guy who he's kind of like Draymond Green. I've seen that comp a lot where he's kind of doing the Draymond Green role, which I think there's no problem with that. I mean, Draymond Green obviously is a three-time champion. So I think he'll easily take that defensive player of the year type of guy. I think Scottie Barnes can, turn into that. I think he definitely could. His ability to switch on inside guys, outside guys, being able to get his hands on the ball. I think that's huge. So Scottie Barnes, I think, is, easily rising up those draft boards. And it seems like he has kind of solidified that number 5 pick for the Magic. Again, assuming they don't trade out of that, but even if they do, whatever team gets that 5, I think would take Scottie Barnes there. So, and like I said earlier, I think this is where the draft really starts after 5, because I think those first 5 picks I think it's really going to be those 5 players. Whatever order I guess it is, could be different, especially that top 3, but I think it will be that order, in what I said. But this is where I think it starts. And for number 6, it's the Thunder. And again, we're not doing trades. I think they probably would trade up in this situation, but again, no trades. So I think I have them I think they'll take Jonathan Kuminga. Like, I don't know exactly how much they are in love with him. I'm not even really in love with him either. And if he doesn't, I will say, if he doesn't get picked at number 6, I could easily see him drop. He wouldn't drop outside the top 10, but he would drop a couple picks. But for this mock draft, and maybe for the next one, it'll change. But I have the Thunder taking Kuminga. And I'm not super high on this. He was in the G League team also with Jalen Green. It seemed like he wasn't doing as well as Jalen Green was. Again, coming out of high school, he was one of those top 5 guys. It seemed like he was a lock to be, one of those top picks. He could maybe even be a top 3 pick coming out of high school. It just seemed like his ability to have his athleticism could just carry him that way. But he really just I just don't think he's the best player. Now, he's great size. He's 6'8". And like I said, super athletic, which definitely plays for teams. And the Thunder definitely like that. They like really athletic guys who could switch defensively, who could just make plays with their athleticism. If you look back at all their previous drafts, that's kind of what they go with. So it kind of would make sense for the Thunder to go with him. But I don't know if their draft philosophy has changed, and that with the way the NBA is, you kind of need guys who definitely are athletic and can switch defensively, but you need shooters. You just need guys who can create their own shot. If they're not going to be shooters, you need them to be able to pass the ball, be able to set screens, do stuff that help the team offensively. I don't think Kuminga really falls in that. It's rather like he's going to be taking shots where he's not a great shooter, so you probably don't want that, or he's just not going to be moving without the ball. So he's kind of in that that middle land, which I think's not a good thing. I think that's something that could scare teams off of him. Is that, again, he's not a great shooter, only 24.5% from 3. He did average 16 points, so he can definitely score, but it seems like he's kind of a guy who you definitely see at nights he'd be like 7 for 20 a lot of nights. And he may put up points, but it's like, you're 7 to 20, you got to stop shooting. And he's probably going to take a couple threes a game that you're like, you just cannot take those threes. So I think there's just a lot of concerns with him. If you were able to get him right and get his head going in the right direction, and even if the shooting were just come along a little bit, wouldn't be a great shooter, but just like, taking him here and there, and you can make him sometimes, but you're really just attacking the basket, and that's what the main thing that you're doing is. I think you could definitely get him on the right path, but that's going to take a lot of coaching, a lot of development. The Thunder can definitely do that, but it's just a big project to do. So if you're willing to do that, I think it could definitely work out in the end. But again, there's still a lot of questions with that. So even though I don't love this at 6, I think he probably would go 6. And again, if he doesn't, I think he slips a couple picks, but again, not outside the top 10. But moving to number 7, this is the Warriors. So this is definitely probably the most interesting pick of the draft, I would say, because the Warriors obviously last year they just missed the playoffs. They didn't have Clay though, so he's going to be back this year. So you'd assume that they'd be better, probably like pretty solidified in that playoff spot. And even though it's the West, I think they definitely would. So they're at number 7. They also have number 14, but for 7, and this is the guy who's also been, going up the draft boards, is James Bouknight from UConn, and he's a guy who you probably never even heard of, to be honest. Like probably going into last season, that college season, unless you're like really big into college basketball. But he's just a guy who has just been rising up these draft boards. Like I said, he's 6'3.5", so again, possibly could possibly get up to like 6'5", maybe, but he's going to be a shooting guard, small forward, probably a shooting guard, but again, with Clay there, he'd probably be like a small forward option. He may even come off the bench with the Warriors because you have Wiggins, obviously you have Clay, Steph, so he'd probably come off the bench, but just to start with, but he'd go into that starting role at some point in his career. But I think he's just the perfect player for them. A lot of people have been saying that you could put him in an NBA team right now and he'd be able to play big minutes. And I think that's the biggest thing with all these draft guys is that can you put them in and can they play the last 4 minutes of an NBA game when it's a close game? And a lot of those guys really can't answer that question, but I think he can. I think you could play in the last 4 minutes of a basketball game when it's a 2-possession game, 1-possession game. His ability to switch on defense, which it seems like a lot of these guys in this draft have gotten better defensively, which you wouldn't really see it with the younger guys. They're just not great defensively. They're not really focusing on it. But a lot of guys in this draft are actually really good defensively, and not even just defensively for him, but offensively. He did average 19 points at college on a UConn team that really wasn't that good. So they had a lot of losses this season, but again, it's kind of hard in college basketball when you really only have one good guy. And it's the same for the NBA. Just having one good guy isn't going to get you wins. So I think him going in a situation like the Warriors where he's not even have to put up that many points per game, obviously with Steph, Clay, even Wiggins there. Wiseman maybe takes a little bit of a step and can get you like 12 to 14 points a game. So I think for him, he can come off the bench. He can pick his spots. He's always going to be playing with Steph or Clay at some point, in the game. So he's always going to have a all-time elite scorer on the court with him. You'd assume Draymond would be on the court. I think him and Draymond work really well. And I think this is just a perfect team for him to go to, not only for the Warriors, just for this season and competing, but also for the future when, Clay and Steph, they're kind of, obviously they're over 30. Steph's, I think 33, I think he is. So, even for the future when those guys, are kind of, tailing off just a little bit, I think he can step up and become maybe not your number one, like a true number one option, but he could be a really solid number 2 option. The shooting is going to have to get there a little bit. Only shot 30% from 3. But again, being in that Warrior system with Kerr and Curry and Clay and Draymond, I think he can learn a lot. I think he's going to be an impact player for them, which, that's exactly what you look for in the draft. You want impact players and guys who aren't going to be too scared of the moment and guys who you can't play at the end of games. I think you definitely could play them at the end of games. Maybe with their roster construction, the players that they have, he wouldn't, but I think you could definitely do it if, they didn't have Wiggins. I think he could easily be playing those last 4 minutes of an NBA game. But for number 8, so it's also the Magic. So again, they had those 2 first-round picks. Obviously, one was from the Bulls and that Vucevic trade. So this is kind of a tough pick for them because this is kind of where I think those first 7 guys that from 4 to 7 when you started with Suggs and you got to James Bouknight, I think that's probably the second level of players. So you're kind of looking at the 3rd level right now, and sure, it's only the 8th pick, so that's kind of a little bit concerning. But some drafts are a little bit deeper, but you're ready at number 8, and you're probably on that 3rd level already. But for the Magic, I think they have 2 options here, and I think they'd probably go with Franz Wagner from Michigan. Now, people may say that they could go with Davion Mitchell from Baylor. Obviously, he's great defensively. The 3-point shooting was there this season and really wasn't there the year before. So don't really know how that's going to correlate. Was it just, just like a crazy season that he had? not one that you'd expect going forward, or is this the norm going forward? So we don't know exactly yet. So we'll see what happens in his first year. But I think you would definitely take him if you're the Magic there. And I'm not taking him because they took Cole Anthony last year. I don't think that matters. I think you take best player available, especially when it comes to this point in the draft. But I don't know. I just think that for a Magic team, they need someone like a Franz Wagner. I think he just really fits what they would need. He's obviously going to be a great shooter, which is what you always need in the NBA. You always need someone who could shoot. He definitely has some playmaking. I think people kind of underestimate his playmaking with the ball. He can definitely dribble and drive. Again, he's never going to be a great passer. He's never going to be a great like shot maker, or be able to create his own shot very easily. Like, if you think of like a Devin Booker, he can kind of create his own shot whenever he wants to. That's never going to be him. I would assume maybe he somehow develops into that. I don't think he would, but I think he's going to be a really solid starter for a Magic team that obviously isn't going to be good. Obviously they traded away a lot of their players last season, and Gordon and Vucevic and Fournier. So they're going to be a struggling team. But I think getting a guy like him, over time, as you keep getting picks and you hopefully hit on like one or two of those guys who could truly be like, a superstar, all-star type level guy, I think he's going to be a really complementary piece to that guy and for that team, where obviously you hope you're competing for the playoffs, getting, obviously far in the playoffs. But I think he's just a really good guy for that. Defensively, he's never going to be great defensively, but I think he's versatile. He could definitely switch. He's 6'9", and he's pretty quick on his feet for, again, being 6'9". He's 220. So I just think he's a solid player. I think any team would love to have him because he just can fit any team. He's a guy who can, like I said, he can make threes at a pretty, elite level, 38.5% from three last season in college. So you'd assume that, maybe his rookie year, he maybe struggles a little bit, just the change in three-point line between college and the NBA, but you would assume he'd be a pretty, elite level 3-point shooter in the NBA. And like I said, he can't really create his own shot so easily, but he definitely can if he has to. And I think that as long as that develops just a little bit, and his ability to drive to the basket, I think he could be a pretty solid offensive player for the Magic. And like I said, I think any team would just love to have a player like this, that whether you're starting or coming off the bench, I mean, that's a guy in your rotation that you can count on to be able to make shots. And that's, I think, the biggest thing in the NBA. And again, defensively, he can switch on guards. He's not going to be the best defender ever. That's, it's never going to be the case, but his ability to switch, I think, is just huge. And that's what, every team switches nowadays. So he'd fit any team, like I said. And I think it'd be a really good pick for the Magic. But for number 9, the Kings, I think this is where, I think they'd probably love to have, Franz Wagner there, but I think they'd have to settle with Davion Mitchell. Obviously, they have Fox and Halliburton. So you're probably saying, again, this is another situation where it's like, do I really going to take a point guard here? A guy who's only, 6 foot. He's like barely 6 foot, honestly. He might not even be 6 foot, but I think he just fits that team. His ability to play defense at such an elite level. He's going to be one of the best defenders, in the league at some point. If it, it just will be, because as long as he's playing. And then there's always, talks in Sacramento about Fox, possibly getting traded. There's always that situation, that possibility. Even this offseason, maybe next offseason, again, they've been pretty bad ever since, Fox has gotten there in 2017. So there's always that possibility that Fox just isn't there. Then Mitchell could play that point guard. Tyrese could play the 2 guard. Obviously you could have Tyrese handle the ball, whatever you want, but he could go into that starting rotation. But let's just assume that Fox is going to be there. I think he'd just be a really good 6-man. Again, he can't start on that team, but he could be a really good 6-man. He can definitely handle the ball. We saw it last year with Baylor that he was able to get a lot of assists, and it's not just him passing and people making shots. He's his ability to make plays while on offense for himself and then for others. I think is, I wouldn't say elite, but I'd say, pretty above average for someone coming out of college. Now, he is 22 years old. He's definitely an older, prospect. A lot of these guys are 18, 19, at most 20. So he is obviously one of the older guys in this draft. But I think that helps. I think experience helps, especially, he was at college, but he's playing big-time college games. Obviously, they won the championship last year. So he's been in big games. The 3-point percentage has gone up. He's 31% from his first 2 seasons in college. Then he was all the way up to 45% last year. So again, like I was saying, is that, was that just a blip on the radar, or is that going to be the norm going forward? We don't know that yet, but if that is maybe not 45% is going to be the norm, but maybe 38 to 42%, somewhere around there. That's obviously, that's pretty good 3-point, shot making. So if you can do that, which again, like I said, that's pretty good 3-point shooting from a guy with his ability to just be an absolute amazing defender on that side of the court. I think he just fits this Kings team, a team that is just, it seems like it has talent, but just never can do anything, whether it's the defense, the coaching, other factors on that team. We'll see what happens with Buddy Hield also. Is he going to get traded? It seems like he probably will, but again, we don't know that for sure. They've had discussions with the Lakers and the Sixers, I think I've seen. So I think Fox, he's been thrown out there in a Ben Simmons trade. So we don't know what's going to happen with them just right now, but I think Mitchell just fits that team. Again, they'll probably be pretty bad this year, but if Fox gets traded or if they keep this team together, get a new head coach, Luke Walton really doesn't seem to be the answer there. This is probably his last year, to be honest, but I think going forward, he just fits this team really well. And again, he's another guy that I think that most teams would like to have. You'd wish he'd be taller. 6 foot is definitely very small, but his just ability to just go after other point guards, where it's a very heavy point guard league, I think is just very valuable, especially when you have a guy like Fox who's not, he's good defensively, but he's not great defensively, and you need him for his offense. But all right, so now we get to the number 10 pick in this draft. So it's going to be the Pelicans. And they're a very interesting team because they have the talent to be like a playoff team, probably like a 6, 7, 8, 6 probably the most, but like a 7, 8, probably a play-in team, that's coming back this year. So this is probably a pretty big draft pick, someone that they need to be able to play. I think the right guy for them is Corey Kispert from Gonzaga. He was really good last year, obviously on an amazing Gonzaga team with Suggs, obviously, and Drew Timme, but he averaged 19 points per game last season. I don't think he's that guy in the NBA, but he shot 44% from 3. He's always been a really solid elite level 3-point shooter. So that's going to translate into the NBA. Again, he may not be 44%, but he's going to be 40%, I would say. Which is obviously what you want, especially on a team like the Pelicans, where you have Zion, who's not a shooter. He's going to be inside with the ball in the paint. So if he can kick out, and again, Zion's been more willing to pass, from his, over his first 2 years in the NBA. So if you can kick out the shooters, which is exactly what you need with a guy like Zion, again, the perfect example is the Bucks. You have Giannis, who's going to attack the paint, attack the basket all the time. But as we saw in the finals, if you can kick out the shooters and you can make shots, that's how you're going to win games. So to have Corey Kispert on the perimeter with Zion on the court, that's just a great 3-point shooter to have. Obviously, you're going to have Ingram on there. We'll see what happens with Lonzo Ball in that situation. He's a better 3-point shooter now than obviously he was earlier in his career, but we'll see if they even keep him. They'll probably just trade him, to be honest, probably sign and trade him, I would assume. But maybe they do keep him, and that, again, that'd be big for that team also if they really want to make the playoffs this year. Obviously, new head coach Willie Green's going to be there, but I think he fits this team right. If you could possibly trade down like 2 picks and still get him, I think that'd be perfect. 10 might be a little too high for him. But again, I think if he's there at 10 and you can't really trade down with anyone, and again, you have to assume that no one's going to take him at like 11 or 12 if you do trade down. I think you take him here. I think he just fits your team well. Again, he's kind of like, Wagner. He's probably a little more gifted offensively, but I think that he just fits any team really well. And I think for the Pelicans, I think it's just a solid draft pick that's going to bode your team well in the future. But for number 11, and again, I think this is maybe kind of where you get into that 4th tier, I want to say, at least in my mind. Maybe other people have, other opinions on that, but I think this is kind of where you get to that 4th tier. And it's kind of tough, you're kind of looking at these guys and you're not exactly really sure where to go. But for me, for the Hornets, I'm going to go with Kai Jones. And, he was out of Texas. He's 6'10". He's pretty good defensively. He has a lot of athleticism. His shot blocking ability is definitely there for sure. With a team like the Hornets, you're obviously going to have LaMelo Ball. as your point guard. So his ability to run the court and be able to get lobs, kind of like Mikal Bridge or Miles Bridges, or there. It's kind of just a bigger version of Miles Bridges, more of like a. I guess he'd be like a. I don't know if he'd be power forward or center, probably like a combo between those. He could probably play center, but he's probably more of like a power forward. But we'll see what happens with that. But his ability to rim run and be able to just get up and down the court with LaMelo, again, his threat as a lob threat, I think is huge. So that ability alone makes it just a good draft pick for them, because the Hornets are going to want to play in transition. That's where they're best at, in transition with LaMelo. Running that offense, you rather do lobs or kick out to shooters. That's kind of the way their offense is. So he definitely works with that. And even from three last year, he did shoot 39.5%, not on a lot of threes, but he definitely showed that capability to make threes. So maybe that develops just a little bit to the point where you're very comfortable kicking it outside to him, if he is on the perimeter. It's not like he'd be taking 4 or 5 threes a game, but maybe he takes 2 threes a game, and he could hit 35% of those. And I think that's pretty big when you add to a guy, especially for his rookie season, when you already know he has the ability to rim run. He's gonna be a shot blocking guy. I don't know exactly how he's gonna be pretty good defensively, but we'll have to see exactly how locked in he's going to be, especially with bigger guys in the paint. Again, like, shot blocking ability doesn't always mean you're a great defender. Just means that you have a good ability to deter shots and be able to kind of make people uncomfortable when in the paint. But if that, again, he's more of a developmental guy, just a little bit. But I think it's a solid pick for the Hornets at 11. And if you were to be able to get him at 11, I think you're pretty happy with that. But for 12 at the Spurs, this is a guy who, I don't exactly know a lot of. I don't think a lot of people know exactly a lot about him because he played overseas, but it's Usman Garuba. I'm assuming I'm saying that name right, at least the last name, but he's 19, he's 6'8" already. He played for Real Madrid. And he's a guy who I think he just fits a Spurs team. Again, I don't know exactly a lot about him, but he's a very good defender. That is what I do know. His ability to play defense is pretty much at an elite level already. For a guy that size, his ability to switch on guards, be able to play the paint also. That's the guy who fits that Spurs system. Now, he's not great offensively, which I think if you're the Spurs, you probably would like to look for an offensive guy. You don't exactly have that. And again, DeRozan, I guess he'll be on the Spurs this season. We'll see. He might get traded, but if anything, he'll probably get traded at the deadline if he doesn't get traded in the offseason. But he's you'd like to see an offensive game from him, but that's not really who he's going to be. He's going to be a defensive guy. He's going to be able to switch on guys. He's going to be able to play big on guys in the paint. So just to have, I think, again, always to have a guy like that, I think is never a bad thing. I think that for the future, I think that bodes well for your teams. You already have like a lockdown defender guy, whether it's in the paint or on the perimeter, on guards, on switches, which obviously, like I said earlier, every team switches. So you need a guy like this anyways. So as long as he really does fill that out and he does become that elite defender who could play at the end of games, which again, it's always the biggest factor with guys in the draft, then in the future, you just hope that they draft well and they get an offensive guy who could, carry the scoring load on that side. And then you have, Garuba on the defensive side. So again, I don't know exactly a lot about him, but I just think that he fits this team. From what I do know, I think he fits a Spurs team pretty well. And again, the Spurs are probably going to be pretty bad this season. Like I said, I would assume they trade DeRozan at some point. So they're probably going to be in the top 10 next year, I think, for sure. Against the Spurs, so it's kind of tough to tell, but I think it's pretty obvious that they will be in the top 10 next season. So you're looking for that offensive guy next season. But for 13, the last 3 picks here, I'm actually pretty excited about a couple of these picks because I think some of them fit these teams really well. But for 13, this is another guy from overseas who I don't know exactly a lot about. Again. But I've seen him on, just looking at draft boards, looking at some analysis, some research and stuff. It seems like this is probably the spot that he'd go. He might fall just a little bit here, but depending on, it's the Pacers at 13. So we'll see exactly if they were to take him. And another guy I would like here would be Keon Johnson. But for 13 here, I think the Pacers go Josh Giddey. Again, another overseas guy. He's 6'8". He's only 18 years old, so again, he's not a lot of experience, but he's probably a guy you have to develop a little bit. The offensive game probably isn't exactly where you'd want it to be, but his feel for the game, I think, is there. He averaged he averaged 7.5 assists and 7 rebounds, and 11.5 points per game. Just looking at his stats from last season, so he definitely has the ability to be like an all-around type player. Whether the offense, if he could ever get up to 15 points per game, which I don't know exactly what happened, but if he can get you 12 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, somewhere in that range, just doing stuff on the court. The defense is definitely, it's not there, but I think it could definitely get there with some good coaching. Obviously, Rick Carlisle is going to be there. He's I think he's one of the top coaches in the NBA. So having him there, having Sabonis there, I think can definitely help him a lot. Because Sabonis is very similar. Now, obviously, Sabonis is better, and I don't think he's ever going to get up to there, Josh Giddey. But just learning from a guy like that, a guy who can put up triple doubles, helps the team in every aspect of the game, rebounding, passing, shooting, defending. I think he could learn a lot from him. Again, the offense I don't think is ever going to be like that, but I think the defense can just get a little bit better to the point where he could definitely play bigger minutes if that defense gets up, and then his feel for the game, his ability to pass, move without the ball. The shooting isn't exactly where you want it to be, but it could get a little bit better, especially in an NBA game where the spacing is a lot wider. People are more open for shots. I think if he's just confident, I think confidence is a big key for him. So I think it's more of a developmental guy, but I think it could definitely work out, especially in that right culture, that right situation that the Pacers have with Rick Carlisle. So I think it's definitely a solid pick at 13 for the Pacers. But this is kind of the pick I'm very excited about, and it's another Warriors pick at 14, and it's Chris Duarte, who's been kind of like James Bouknight. He's been, going up, and Scotty Barnes. They've been going up draft boards as, people have been locking in on the draft and the prospects and kind of ranking guys. He's someone who's just shot up the boards. And even though he's not going to go top 10, I wouldn't assume he'd go top 10. I think this 13, 14, 15 range is probably right for him. I think that's probably the perfect location for him. He's definitely an older guy. He's 23 already. He was a senior at Oregon. He kind of turned it up a little bit last season, averaged 17 points per game, 42.5% from three. That's what he is going to be. He's a strong shooter. He's going to be able to make shots, which, again, that's always what you want. So for a Warriors team like that, again, another guy can come off the bench. They just need players who could play minutes for them and be comfortable out there, that you have confidence in when they're out there. And again, if you can hit shots in the NBA, playing with Curry and Clay, you're going to have so much spacing. You're going to be open most of the time if they kick out to you. So his ability to make shots, I think, it's just huge for them already, because when he gets into the game, he's going to be able to make those shots. We'll see what his points per game is. Again, I'm not really worried about that, because I just think that his impact on the game offensively for that team is going to be just huge for them. The defense, it's not exactly, like exactly where you want it to be, I guess I'd say. It definitely has ability to grow, but just I think his ability to be that good of a shooter already. Again, he's 6'6", so he can kind of be that, small forward guy, I guess you could say. Him and Bouknight are pretty similar in that, their heights and everything like that. But I think you just have if they were to get Duarte and Bouknight, two solid wing reserves. And I think that's for a team like this that wants to compete and thinks that they can get back to an NBA championship. And that's exactly what you need. Just need two guys who they may Bouknight's a pretty good defender, but Duarte is not the greatest defender, but as long as they could just hold their own out there, you'd hope that the offense, the spacing, the ability to handle the ball can just overshadow what the defense is exactly showing. And if that works out for the Warriors, I mean, they're going to be one of the top teams in the West. Assuming Curry is what he did last season, Clay is at least like 90% healthy, obviously with the torn ACL and the torn Achilles. Draymond, he's not going to have to score, like at all, basically. And then Wiggins, obviously, Wiseman, if he takes another step. So, if they get these two guys and then, their young guys can just step up, I mean, they're going to be a very interesting team. And like I said, one of the top teams in the West for sure. But for the last pick, at 15, it's the Wizards. Definitely an interesting pick. only because of, I would say, the future of that team. It seems like Bradley Beal, he's weighing his future pretty heavily. There's been a lot of reports recently about he's going to request a trade, then he's not going to request a trade. He will if they trade Westbrook. He wasn't happy with the coaching decision. He wanted Sam Cassell. I saw that report. A lot of the Wizards guys have been saying that he hasn't. This happens every single year. People say he's going to request a trade. He hasn't requested a trade yet. It's not going to happen. So it's a lot of back and forth on that end. But I think if you're the Wizards, you should have to draft. You have to draft as if this is the team you have, assuming that they don't trade him or Westbrook before the draft. Which again, that's in only a couple of days, so I wouldn't assume that they would. But you have to draft as if this is their team. This kind of happened to Thunder a couple years ago when they had George and Westbrook. They drafted as if that was their team, and then they traded George and Westbrook after the draft. So I think you have to go that route. Just draft as if you still have Beal, you still have Westbrook. You're going with that team. You have your new coach in Wes Unseld Jr. So I think a good player for them would be Moses Moody, and it does turn out that he kind of does fit like a Bradley Beal role. And that's kind of somewhat of the comps, a little bit has been Bradley Beal. Maybe not, he wouldn't average 30 points per game, but just his size, his athleticism, and his build seems like a Bradley Beal build. But I think he is the perfect player for this team at 15. He shot 38% from three last season on 145 attempts, so that's a pretty good amount of production from three. We had 38%. That's what this Wizards team does need. They need shooting. When you have Beal, Westbrook, they're obviously going to dominate the ball a lot. So you need guys when they kick out to be able to make shots and definitely make their kind of create their own way offensively. Which obviously that's going to have to develop for him. That you're not going to do that in your rookie season when you have Beal and Westbrook, because you're not going to have the ball enough. That's just obviously no one's going to expect that out of him. But if he can make shots, that's obviously what every team needs, but especially the Wizards, because just of the two guys that you already have with the ball. So I think if he can be able to do that, I think that's huge for them, obviously. And then defensively, he's not great defensively. I would say he's decent. For a team that has obviously struggled with defense the last couple of seasons, you'd probably like to have a really good defensive player there. But if his shooting can, overshadow that defense, I think he'll easily take that, because again, offense, even though defense does win, I think I think offense does win also. If you could just outscore your opponent, like the Nets, obviously, I'm not comparing them to the Nets, but like the Nets kind of just said, if we just outscore every team, we're just going to win every game, because no team's going to be able to put up the production that we have with Durant, Harden, and Irving, which would, I think was true last season. Obviously in the playoffs, again, if they don't get injured, I think they win the championship. But I think that's somewhere that you can look at for the Wizards, where like your defense probably still isn't going to be great no matter what. Even Wes Unseld Jr. was a defensive coach with the Nuggets, and you'd hope that it'd be a little bit better. It's probably not going to be great. You'd probably hope middle of the pack. That's probably the best you could hope for. So just adding Moses Moody, I think that, like I said, the shooting's going to be there for sure. He's going to be a knockdown shooter, and his ability to create his own shot, I think, can come in the future. We'll just have to see about the future of that team, but I think he just fits really well with this team for the Wizards. So that was the first 15 picks in the NBA draft, my mock draft. When we do the second one, I think it'll probably be pretty similar. Again, I may have a couple trades in there. That number 3 pick of the Cavs is just a very enticing pick to trade for. Do the Warriors possibly trade up? Like I said, do the Magic trade up even? A lot of people have been saying the Thunder could trade up to number 3 and then trade up to number 1. A lot of people have been saying that as a possibility. If they truly are in love with Cade, you could easily do that. Him and Shea together would be absolutely ridiculous. I think they're basically the same player, which having those two guys on the court, I think is just like it wouldn't be unstoppable, because like they're still kind of young and stuff, but going in the future, that'd be pretty unstoppable. They have two guys, that height, that ability to shoot, to defend, to space the ball, to handle the ball. I mean, that'd be ridiculous, but we'll see what happens. Like I said, Drew's gonna have his mock draft. We'll see how similar it is to that. I assume it would be somewhat similar, but I think as you get kind of towards the 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that kind of area, I think it may be a little bit different. But I guess we'll see. But again, the next time we do a mock draft, next episode, it's going to be both of us together. And that will probably be Thursday. Definitely before the draft, obviously, but we'll see what happens with that. But for now, I guess just thanks for watching. The social media, everything's in the in the bio below. Check out our last couple of videos. And yeah, thanks for watching.
I was unsure on whether or not to record a introduction for this video because you kind of just got finished watching with Brandon's mock draft, but if you click the timestamp in the description, you didn't watch Brandon's mock draft. So if that's the case, welcome. This is the whole 9 yards. This is my mock draft for the 21-21 NBA draft. Without further ado, I kind of want to just get into it. This is what I would do if I'm the GM of these teams. This is not what I think will happen by any means. I'm going to do what I think will happen. It might be close to this, it might not, in a couple days with Brandon. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get together for this, but we'll just get into it. With the number 1 pick in the 2020 NBA draft, the Detroit Pistons. Sorry if I'm speaking fast, but trying to not make this a 2-hour mock draft. So I'm going with Cade Cunningham. I don't have to talk about it. Really, I don't. Cade's the best player in this draft, in my opinion. It's not necessarily like an Anthony Davis or LeBron James or any gap like that, but it's a sizable gap. I think he's up there with that Zion type. Not the hype, definitely not the hype, but I mean, if you factor in Zion's injury history, I genuinely think he's close on that tier. He's not on that tier with Zion in terms of the hype the prospect gets, or maybe how good of a prospect he is, but he's up there. He's up there. I'm gonna go with Cade. You could consider other things, but you would trade down if you're the Pistons. And this is, by the way, no trades. The next mock draft, there probably will be trades, but this one, no trades. No, can't even think of it. It's literally illegal in this mock draft. So, Cade. The second pick, I'm going with Evan Mobley. I know that Jalen Green is, what people have switched to. Personally, after doing as much research as I possibly can, watching as much as I can, going with what I think is going to be the case, listening to other people who their opinions I respect, I think Evan Mobley's the guy here at 2. I think he's the better player. I think Jalen, and I'll talk about Jalen Green later, but I think Evan Mobley can really kind of do it all. I mean, he's a 7-foot center who I don't have to be scared that he won't ever, be a guy who's just in the paint all the time. He's a 7-footer that doesn't have the downsides that most 7-footers have in the game. Looking at a guy like Rudy Gobert, yeah, he might be Defensive Player of the Year. He might be a guy that contributes to a number 1 seed in regular season team, but in playoff games and big moments, you notice those negatives so much. And with a guy like Evan Mobley, you really shouldn't have that. He should be a guy that should be able to be really good defensively, should be able to be really good offensively, should be able to pass the ball, run in transition, shoot the ball. I have really no concerns, and we'll see what Fanspo says. Fanspo is the mock draft simulator that I'm using here. I mean, it says areas to improve, not a physical defensive rebounder, high center of gravity, gets wedged up position by stronger bigs. That may be true, but I mean, he's going to be able to. Okay, so if he plays a bigger big, essentially I like his mismatches more than I do the bigger bigs mismatches. It might be difficult against an Embiid, but I mean, who doesn't have it difficult against Embiid? Nobody can guard Embiid and Jokic in this league. You're not going to find a guy who's just a straight counter. Gobert might be the closest. I don't know, but even Gobert, he's not gonna go out on the perimeter and guard Embiid. Mobley would not be a horrible guarder of Embiid. I mean, he wouldn't be great by any means, but I think there's so many pluses here. I'm going to talk about it with Brandon more because he's a Green guy. I'm a Mobley guy. I actually would probably say, and when I was making this draft, and this is kind of what I would do, so I don't have to, bet on what other people will do. I was closer to having Suggs at 3 and Green at 4 than I was to Green at 2 and Mobley at 3, if that makes sense. So to me, I had Green closer to 4 than 2. It's not a slight on Green. I think Green has an insane amount of potential. He can do a lot in this league. He could be a guy that 3 years from now, we're all like, wow, why did he not go number 1? He's clearly the best player in this draft. He has Zach LaVine type hops, and he should be able to get a bigger frame. He won't ever be able to guard, more than 3 positions in this league probably, but he doesn't need to do that. If he can become an above average defender, which I think he can, I don't think it'll happen, but I think he can do it. If he can do that while also being an elite scorer, which he has clear potential to do, obviously, he might be the best player in this draft. But with that being said, I do like Mobley more. I think Mobley's also a safer pick. I don't see a way in which Mobley is an all-star and probably an all-NBA player in this league. And the years to come. So I'm going to go with Mobley. At third, I am going with Green. I kind of already spoiled that. It's tough. I wanted to go with Suggs. I really did, but the upside on Green is too high. And I love Suggs. I think I like Suggs more than other people do. I think Suggs is going to be a great leader in the NBA. It's going to come down to, is his floor just too high and ceiling too low? That's kind of the question. But I don't think it is. I think Suggs can be a guy that eventually may be able to be a number one on a team. Not like Steph Curry, but I mean, he might be able to be a number one or a number 1B or maybe a 2 on a team. I think he can definitely be that. And going back to Green though, Green has an insane amount of potential. He could be the best guy in this draft. He also could be a guy who is a good, not great offensive player. He could be a guy that is really streaky offensively. Sometimes he makes his shots, sometimes he doesn't. I think his floor is lower than most guys in the top 4, in my opinion. I think his floor is probably a guy who comes off the bench and gives you a good spark off the bench, but really he's not great defensively, and sometimes you just don't see him offensively. He just misses his shots, and that's that. And he never really, manages to pull that athleticism with, a solid defensive toolkit and a solid offensive toolkit. And if he can't bring all those together, then yeah, I think there's a solid chance that he could end up being a guy that is a B to B minus to B plus player. And I don't know that you want that out of this draft, really, with the top 4 players that we have here. At 4, it's Suggs. I think Suggs is a phenomenal player, and I know I could make him higher than 4. Nobody really has, and I'm not here. I'm going to take him at 4, but I love Suggs. I really do. I think there's a chance that I could be making a mistake by having him at 4 and not at 3. He's a guy that in a few years, he could be leading this Raptor team to conference finals. I'm not over-exaggerating there. I think in the next few years, if you told me the Raptors are in the conference finals and Suggs was, a top 2 player in this draft or a top 3 player in this draft, I wouldn't be surprised. This Toronto team's already good, obviously, with Nick Nurse as a great head coach. Pascal Siakam was a guy who, before last season, was a top 30 guy in the league. Kyle Lowry, he's gone, so Suggs will fill that position. Van Vliet's a guy who we've seen he can score. He's a part of this Raptors team. He's going to be able to be your number 2, essentially, maybe your number 3, depending on how good Pascal is. We'll see on that. Boucher's another guy. OG Anunoby's a great player. You have so many great players in this team, and frankly, they shouldn't be at number 4. Just because obviously with playing in Toronto last year, and they also jumped in the lottery, so they're fortunate to take Suggs here. They can kind of compete now, but also rebuild for the future, which I think is really important for pretty much any organization, because we've kind of seen teams that, yeah, they still want to compete because they still want to sell tickets and all this stuff, but they don't have that star that they can kind of start to build around, and I think Suggs can be that. Similar to kind of how LaMelo's a guy that, yeah, you don't have to be actually that bad. You can kind of take a guy like LaMelo and he can make you a competitive team instantly without tanking and having to tank and, being garbage and not selling tickets and all this. So Suggs is a great pick for me. I'm not gonna ramble any longer about it. I'll get more in depth with it with Brandon. So next here we have the Magic. It's a tricky pick. I really don't trust the Magic to do anything, but I do think the pick here is going to be a surprising one. It's James Bouknight. I don't trust the Magic's player development. We could go through the list of just failed Magic players who had potential. Jonathan Isaac's a guy he's the only guy who's worked out, and has still had a rocky career. Obviously, I hope he gets well, and hopefully he comes back and plays better than ever. Mo Bamba's a guy who just never worked out. Of course, they pick up a guy like Wendell Carter. Cole Anthony's been a pleasant surprise, but we could genuinely go through the power forwards and centers who just haven't worked out. If I had a list in front of me, I'm sure I'd have at least 5 people from the past 7 years. I don't trust the Magic player development to get Scotty Barnes to develop a jump shot, or Kuminga to develop a jump shot, or any game. Bouknight's a guy who can score and shoot, and that's what you need. Bouknight was a guy who his mechanics are great. It looks like he can shoot the ball. He only shot 31% last year, but if you look at some of his clips from the combines and some of the workouts, he does look great. He looks like a good shooter, and his free throw percentages were good, which is typically indicative of a guy who can translate his shooting skill to the NBA. We'll see on that, but I think Book Knight's a great guy. And I'm actually happy that I can take him as high as 5 in this draft because I think he is a great player and I think he has potential to be a great player. His ceiling may not be as high as a Kuminga or maybe even as a Barnes just because theoretically anybody who does anything but a jump shot has a high ceiling because if you just get a jump shot. But we've seen so many times in drafts that there's going to be a bunch of players who we say that about and they don't get jump shots. And that's just the reality of a draft and the magic of a horrible track record. And yeah, ideally Kuminga's probably the guy here. I mean, if this was the Raptors, you could consider taking Kuminga. If they were picking 4 and 5, you would take Kuminga probably, just based off pure raw potential, and their player development staff has been insane. But it's the Magic. I'd take Book Knight. The Thunder here at 6. This is a little bit of a difficult pick, but I mean, they love Barnes. They've been in the rumors for Ben Simmons. Scotty Barnes isn't Ben Simmons, but he's kind of close in the way that he can just guard 1 through 5 almost. He's a little less athletic. He's a little, he's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit bulkier than Ben Simmons. He's less athletic than Ben Simmons, but he has the potential to be maybe almost as good defensively. And I know I just said this, but if he can develop a jump shot, he has a high ceiling. He really does. He can run a little bit of point guard. He can play off the ball a little bit. He can pass. He's a great passer. And obviously with the defensive side, the ceiling is, very high and the floor is also very high. So Scotty Barnes is a guy for me. They could go Kuminga. To me, the Thunder here, either Barnes or Kuminga. I think Barnes is the guy that they want to go with. I like them with Barnes here. I really do like Barnes. I think if they want it, then I want it. Kind of, I question Kuminga a little bit because I just think he's a little bit raw. And do I want to throw him in there with literally almost nothing around him, assuming Kemba's not there? No, I think Barnes can thrive better in that type of environment. And I think Barnes is a player that they want. And if they have, the development staff that kind of fits well around Barnes, I will trust, the guys who know about it. And I think Barnes is a fine pick. If you told me Kuminga, I wouldn't hate it, but I think Barnes is a pick here. Which leads to my 7th pick. And maybe this is because I'm setting the draft up this way, but to me, this is a little shocking, but I'm going to go with Kuminga. Obviously, Davion Mitchell is the guy who's been mocked here for, ever since Baylor won the championship pretty much. But my only question with Mitchell is you're going to pick a guy 7th overall to essentially be your 7th or 8th man down the rotation, and he's already like a 20 whatever year old junior who's 6'2", who really can't play with Curry. That's rough. At the 7th pick. He has a high floor for sure. He's a good defender, but again, he can only guard positions 1 and maybe 2. But he doesn't have the ceiling, and I know you're the Warriors, you want to compete now, but I mean, if I'm not trading this pick, which by the way, if there were trades, I would 100% be trading this pick, but with no trades, let's just take the guy with the ceiling. Maybe he sees a little bit of play time. Maybe you throw him in the G League. But I think he's a guy that could play. And if you throw him in this Warriors offense, I actually like that. Their player development, to me, I trust much more than an organization like Orlando. If you throw him in there, they move the ball so well, especially when they have Curry and Clay and Draymond all in that court. And we used to be KD, but even without him, they move the ball just so well. Everybody knows that from watching their games. I think Kuminga could fit. He's got such a high ceiling that I think that if you're Golden State here, it's either that or Davion Mitchell, who's at best your 7th or 8th man on the bench. So I'll go with Kuminga. In an ideal world, if there's trades, I'd trade this pick. Stay tuned in a couple days to see a draft like that. But yeah, Kuminga's the pick here at 7. At 8, the Magic are up again. They got this trade in the Wendell Carter, or the Vucevic trade. This is not tricky at all. I think the pick is Franz Wagner. The reason is because honestly, I don't like to draft off fit, but with the Orlando Magic, they're just so difficult because I don't trust them at all. If I'm their GM, I don't trust them at all because nothing's worked. And I don't want to draft another guard. I don't want to draft another power forward. The pick here to me is Franz Wagner. He's kind of the only guy who would be able to fit in this Orlando team. I'd still like to see them make some moves. Obviously, Book Knight's a guy who can score for you, which is huge. Getting him at 5. I think getting a guy like Wagner at 8 is another great pick. And if you told me that you got Book Knight and Wagner, I would consider that a pretty solid draft. It stinks that you pick at 5, but you don't get that like super high ceiling guy theoretically, like a Kuminga. but I think it's much safer, and I really think you can't afford to take another power forward or whatever or 6'8", just essentially block of talent who doesn't work out in Orlando and rots. I like the safeness with Buchnight, who also is a great scorer, and I think Wagner he's a sophomore, but he's pretty young. He's like, what, 19 years old right now? He's 20. I mean, that's pretty much as young as a lot of freshmen are. So I'm not concerned about that. He's deceptively athletic. He's gonna be a better shooter than pretty much anybody on this list, other than like the pure shooters like a Corey Kispert or maybe a Moses Moody. But to me, he's the pick here. So yeah, Wagner at 8 to the Magic. At 9 here, the Kings. This was difficult. It is tricky on who you want to go with here. I did go with Alperen Şengün. To me, it is difficult because you don't really know where this team's going. Obviously, you have Fox, you have Halliburton. Bagley's pretty much as good as gone. Buddy Hield's a guy who could be gone. Harrison's Barnes. You really don't know what the identity of this team's going to be. What's this team going to be in 6 months from now? I have literally no idea. Fox could be gone. Halliburton could be gone. I mean, yeah, Fox he's a guy you wouldn't want to trade, but I mean, if you told me Fox was gone in 6 months from now, I wouldn't be like absolutely shocked. I'd be surprised, but I wouldn't be absolutely shocked. And I don't think you're drafting for fit here. You're not looking to compete now. Ideally, you would. I mean, you would like to make the playoffs, but in this West, it's so competitive. I don't expect it from the Kings. Şengün's a guy who has kind of drawn comparisons to almost Jokic in a way. His vision, his shooting ability. He's not Jokic. He's 6'9", 235. So he doesn't have the frame or the body like Jokic. But let's see what Fanspo says. Arguably productive 18-year-old, and blah 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 blah. 18.5 points, 8.9 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.5 blocks, 1.5 steals in 28 minutes per game, shooting 67% from the field. He's kind of a high ceiling, low floor type of guy, even though I guess a European guy you might consider as maybe a high floor type of guy. He's really not that. He does have a low floor, high ceiling. He might not have the athleticism to compete in the NBA. That's a scare just because, how great are the guys he's playing against? We don't really know. We don't know. He could be a guy that just isn't cut out for the NBA. That could be a possibility. But if he is cut out for the NBA athletically and he has the mental, toughness to stick in this league, and I think he'd work out, and I think he'd be a solid pick, and he'd be a guy that, can do pretty much anything. He can pass. He can do the pick and roll. He can shoot. He can do anything you really need him to. He's not going to be guarding, 1s and 2s and 3s. But, Şengün's the pick here for the Kings at 9. With the trade, I don't think when Brandon filmed, this trade had not happened. It was, the Pelicans swapping 17 with the Grizzlies getting 10. Valanciunas to the Pelicans, and the Grizzlies took the salary in Adams and Bledsoe, but they get to move up 7 picks essentially, and they get that Lakers pick. This is another tricky one. You have options. You could pick a Davion Mitchell if you wanted to, because he's kind of slid. To me, it's tricky, but I do think the idea here is Josh Giddey at 10 for the Grizzlies. He's the guy that has been rumored that they want, and I think he's a guy that at the floor of his game can be a guy who can play make while John Morant's off the floor, but at his height, I think he's a guy who can pretty much do anything at a good to very good level. He can play make. His jump shot does look a bit funky to me, and sometimes when I was watching him, I'm just like, dude, this guy kind of looks like he might not be able to translate to the NBA. He just looks a little off. He looks a little slow. Let's see what does Fanspo say about him? Supersized 6'9" point guard, blah, blah, blah. Third youngest player, has grown 3 inches the past year. So essentially, just supersized point guard. That's what they say as strengths, areas to improve, not the most prolific or efficient scorer, blah, blah, blah. 51% shooting percentage, lacks a degree of strength, explosiveness. Yeah, I think his athleticism is a question. To me, when I was watching it, it was just explosiveness isn't there. It's a lot of, just kind of, he just doesn't have the explosiveness driving to the basket that, a Jalen Green would have, or maybe even a Jalen Johnson might be able to have, or a Keon Johnson would be able to have, or maybe even a Moses Moody would be able to have. He just doesn't have that, but he has the playmaking. It looks like he has the passing ability. He should be able to defend. If he gets a little bit quicker, he doesn't have to be fat. If he gets a little bit quicker, I think he can translate into this league very well. It's a Grizzlies guy to take. Josh Giddey is a Grizzlies guy to take, so I wouldn't be shocked if they took him here. I think it's a solid pick. I would go with Giddey at 10 for the Grizzlies. The Hornets here at 11. This is where it does really actually get tough. Who do you want to pair with LaMelo? Essentially, who can you build with around LaMelo? There's options here. Even as you could take a guy like Kai Jones, a guy like Isaiah Jackson, a rim runner that LaMelo can look good on alley-oops and passes and pick and rolls and all that. I'm going to go with a guy like Jalen Johnson. He's a low-floor, high-ceiling guy. He's known for quitting on Duke pretty much halfway through the year, but he's so explosive. He's almost an opposite to Josh Giddey in a way. He's so explosive, but he's very raw. I mean, as a freshman from Duke, what do you expect in a way? He's very raw. He doesn't really have a jump shot. He's just raw. I mean, he's a freak athlete, but he's super raw. I think he can develop into a guy who can essentially, if he gets a jump shot, which I don't have faith in, but if he can get a jump shot, he looks like a guy who can drive. He can run really well in transition, which I like with LaMelo. I imagine, getting turnovers and LaMelo and Jalen Johnson having some of the best transition, highlights that you'll see in the league. I don't love a lot of the players here for the Hornets, but I think Johnson's a low floor, high ceiling guy that you could take a chance on, and if it works out, then you're really cooking here. I didn't like a lot of the fits. I don't like Mitchell here. I don't like Keon Johnson. Not a fan of Kispert here really. Gruba wouldn't be a bad pick, I don't think, but Gruba's going to be picked in a little bit and soon here. Kai Jones is a reach to me at 11. If they were picking at 16-ish, I would consider Kai Jones there. But I think Jalen Johnson is too much value to pass up on here at 11. If you wanted to trade down in a hypothetical trade mock draft and draft Kai Jones or Isaiah Jackson or maybe another big man, maybe a JT Thor, I mean, that would be way far down, but that could be realistic. But at 11, I go with Johnson, and I hope that he pans out. At 12 here, you would have liked Şengün if you're here for the Spurs. You would have liked Giddey. Obviously, he's been a guy that's been mocked to the Spurs for a while. But I'm going to go with Garuba. I mean, we kind of saw what we needed to in that Spain-USA game. He looks like a guy that when you were watching that's essentially an NBA game, right? I mean, that's essentially the only difference is it's not the Pelicans versus the Grizzlies or whatever. It's not two NBA teams. It's Spain and France. He's a guy that he can rebound. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. He's not gonna be a star in this league, but he's gonna be a guy that should have a 8 to 10 year NBA career. And if he's that, and you can take that at 12 for the Spurs, and maybe even develop into something that can, he's not gonna be an all NBA player, I don't think. But if you can get him to like a borderline all-star potential, maybe for a couple years, I mean, that's as good as you can hope for the 12th pick, and I think he can be that. He's a guy that belongs in this league. It's a relatively safe pick, but I think he'd be a guy that contributes to the Spurs for years to come. So, and if you are going to blow it up, I mean, Usman Garuba's not a bad guy to have. I mean, he's not a bad guy to have if you're going to blow everything up and kind of just essentially, actually start tanking. I don't think that's going to happen, but he's also a guy that can help you compete. So I like to pick a Garuba here at 12. 13 here was, again, pretty difficult. I wasn't exactly too sure on what to do here. There's many options. Davney Mitchell's a guy who you could see go here. He's a guy that you could see going to the Pacers and essentially just providing insane defensive capabilities. If Brogdon's gone, which I think he is, Mitchell would make even more sense. But I don't like the timetable. This team's built to compete now, but with the fact of the reality is this team's not going to be the same come the opening of the regular season. So I don't think Mitchell fits them. I think you take a guy who fits kind of the future. And to me, that's actually, I'm going a little bit down here, but that's actually Zaire Williams. He was a guy who was highly touted coming out of high school. I mean, everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people know Zaire solely from high school basketball. He just had a bad year at Stanford, whether it be COVID or injuries or it just didn't work out for him at Stanford. But I think he has insane potential. He's another freak athlete who plays defense, and he's gonna be a good defender in this league, no doubt about it in my mind. The question's gonna be offensively, but I think he's a low floor, high ceiling guy that at 13, I would rather have this over Davion Mitchell. Davion Mitchell's not gonna help you do anything if you're the Pacers. So to me, I go with Zaire Williams. There's other guys you could take here too. I mean, you could have taken a Keon Johnson. You could have taken a Trey Murphy maybe. You could have taken those guys. You could have taken a Cam Thomas here, but I think I love Zaire. I think I'm a big fan. Maybe I'm biased because maybe I'm just biased, but I like Zaire here at 13. And I think he will go higher than what Fanspo has him mocked here at 24. If he went as late as 24, I would be very surprised. 14 here. This is the last pick I'm doing. To me, it's pretty easy. I mean, the Warriors got their low floor, high ceiling guy in Kuminga at 7, and obviously Mitchell's a guy who's been mocked to the Warriors at 7, but why not just get him at 14? I mean, that's kind of what I realize and what other people realize is, Mitchell is a great fit at 7, but realistically, if you look at the board, and we'll look at the board right now, I mean, what teams from 8 to 14 realistically would love to draft Mitchell? I mean, the Magic, no. Kings, no. Grizzlies, probably not. He's not going to fit with John Morant. The Hornets, probably not. The Spurs, no. The Pacers, to me, are the only legitimate team that could very well take Mitchell. Maybe one of these teams does, but I don't love it for them. And I think, that's a risk I'm willing to take if I'm Golden State. Even if it's now Kuminga, even if it ends up being Barnes here, if it's Wagner, or if it's Şengün, or if it's Jalen Johnson, or if it's let's see the guy I set this up. So even if it's a Keon, if it's whatever, I would take the risk of having Mitchell here at 14 because I don't know that he's worth it taking at 7. I just think that's a pick that, when you're picking at 7, you're picking for upside and you're picking for long term. And if you trade this pick, which I expect to happen, then, this talk is essentially, pointless. But if you're picking here, I don't love the Davion Mitchell pick, and I would prefer to see you get Davion Mitchell at 14. Another route, if Mitchell's gone at 14, could be a guy like Jared Butler on the same team. He was a guy that's kind of maybe didn't have as great of a year as Mitchell last year, but a guy who's been able to be more consistent than just a one-year wonder. A guy like maybe Chris Duarte is another guy, 24-year-old. A guy who can pretty much come in day one. Cam Thomas, maybe a Moses Moody. But as far as notable guys who didn't go in the lottery for me, Keon Johnson's one, Kispert's another, Moody's another, Sharif Cooper's another, Trey Murphy's another. But that's pretty much it. Like, a lot of these guys may not go in the lottery. Jaden Springer's a guy who I could see jumping in the draft. Cam Thomas is a guy who can jump in the draft. Trey Mann's a guy who's probably going to stick around that 20. Maybe he goes as high as, in that high teens. Kai Jones is a guy who could go up, even though I said I don't really want to take him at 11. He's a guy who could jump up in the draft. Isaiah Jackson's a guy who some team may want to draft high up just because of Kentucky, essentially, in my mind. Sharif Cooper's a guy that could go high. Trey Murphy's a guy Moses Moody's a guy who realistically I think will probably end up going in the lottery. He didn't in this draft, but if you're making me bet my life on which player goes where, and my own opinions don't matter, Moody probably goes in this draft, especially when you're adding trades. I just think he's probably too good, at least right now, not to. He's also a high floor guy, and there might be a team here who wants the high floor, and I don't think his ceiling is actually that low. I think he has potential to be a really great player. And what do they say about excellent length for wing at 6'6", blah, 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 big wingspan, shot 42% from 2, 31% from 3, blah, 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 blah. I mean, yeah, inconsistent shooter, looked bad against elite defenses, lives and dies by jump shot, but that's kind of, I don't know what that exactly means, I guess. I think Moody's a guy who probably going to go in the lottery, and I like Moody. I like Moody a lot, even though he's not in my mock draft and the lottery. But with that being said, that is going to wrap it up. I appreciate everybody sticking around. Maybe you watched Brandon's and mine, maybe you didn't, whatever. Media's in the description, all that type of stuff. If you enjoyed, feel free to like, feel free to comment. If you somehow are here, feel free to comment. But that's going to wrap it up. I will see you guys in the next mock draft before the NBA draft.